It began with a tension no one saw coming. A quiet Tuesday evening town hall in Phoenix, Arizona, bright lights, a composed audience, and Barack Obama seated with his jacket open just enough to show ease, without losing authority. He leaned back in that familiar way of his, speaking about the strength of democracy with a cadence people hadn't heard live in years. Then the moderator's earpiece crackled. The air in the room shifted almost instantly. "Mr. President," the moderator stammered into the camera, eyes widening, "we've been informed that President Trump is calling in." A wave of gasps rolled through the room. No one expected a sitting president to intrude on a live event featuring his predecessor. Producers scrambled behind the glass. Stage managers moved like the floor was collapsing beneath them. The moderator looked as if he'd just been handed breaking news about an earthquake. Obama didn't flinch. "Put him through," he said, calm as ever. The screen above the stage lit up. Trump's voice blasted through the speakers before the audio text could soften the volume. "Barack, I had to call in. I'm watching this whole thing and it's a disgrace, a total disgrace." The crowd stiffened. Some shifted in their seats, others whispered. Trump continued barreling forward the way only he could, steamrolling through his talking points about the economy, manufacturing, China, and accolades he claimed only he deserved. Yet the audience wasn't watching him anymore. All eyes were on Obama. Would he take the bait? Would he snap back? Would he stay above the flame? Obama leaned forward gently, fingers laced together. "Mr. President," he said slowly, "I think the American people are less interested in who shouts the loudest and more interested in who tells the truth." A thunder of applause filled the room. Trump came back swinging. But something had shifted. His forcefulness no longer controlled the moment. Obama's poise did. The contrast pulsed through living rooms across the country. Even viewers at home could feel the imbalance. The night was only beginning, and somewhere across the city, inside the East Wing, a storm was building that would make the confrontation on live TV look small by comparison. When the door to the First Lady's private office slammed shut, the sound cut through the hallway like a shard of broken glass. Inside, Melania Trump sat behind her polished mahogany desk, a glass of water untouched at her side. Before her lay the leaked DNA report. Its edges curled where her fingers had gripped it too tightly. Fury rippled through her, a fury she rarely allowed to escape the walls of her composure. But this was different. "This is about Barron," she snapped, her accent slicing through the air. "I will not allow them to destroy my son." Two advisors stood opposite her, uncertain whether to speak. "First Lady," Raymond Hall began cautiously, "we can contain this. Rumors come and go. What matters is, before what?" Melania slammed her hand on the desk. Papers jumped. So did her advisors. "Before every newspaper prints lies about my family, before they drag my son into their politics?" Her voice cracked, not from weakness, but from a fear she refused to show anyone. Hall tried again. "We can get ahead of it." "Get ahead?" She laughed bitterly. "Nothing fades in Washington. Everything becomes permanent." She stood so abruptly her chair scraped against the wall, pacing the room, heels striking marble like the beating of war drums. She muttered, "I stayed silent, I protected, I endured. And this is how they repay me?" Charlotte Winslow, the youngest aide in the room, spoke hesitantly. "Ma'am, we aren't sure who leaked it, but we can start tracing it if we find them," Melania snapped. "I want names." Charlotte scribbled a note before slipping out, pulse racing. Hall stepped forward again. "We have options. We can discredit the report, call it fabricated, tie it to political enemies, or we can wait, release nothing, and let it fade." Melania's eyes hardened. "Nothing fades." She straightened, regaining the stillness she used like armor. "Prepare statements. No one speaks until I approve every word." Hall nodded, though he knew the truth she refused to face. Washington had already started whispering, and Melania's silent fury was becoming part of the story. The morning after Melania's eruption, Washington felt different, heavier somehow, like the air was waiting for the next spark. A black motorcade moved quietly down Pennsylvania Avenue, not headed to a major event, but to a discreet law office tucked between cafes and glass-fronted apartment buildings. This was where political scandals went when their owners were desperate to bury them. Inside the conference room, Raymond Hall sat at a polished table with two attorneys from a firm notorious for handling crises no one was supposed to know existed. The leaked DNA report sat in the center like a live explosive. "We have two paths," one lawyer said flatly. "Discredit or distract." Hall rubbed his temples. "Meaning?" "Call it fabricated," the attorney continued. "Tie it to political opponents, or bury it under a bigger story. Washington can only chase one fire at a time." Hall exhaled. Timing was the enemy. If they pushed too soon, it would look staged. If they waited, it would grow teeth. Back at the White House, Charlotte Winslow returned to Melania with bad news. I've spoken to medical contacts, media sources, and internal staffers, Charlotte said quietly. Whoever leaked this knew what they were doing. The trail is clean. Melania's jaw tightened. By the time Hall called to brief her, she was pacing again, phone pressed to her ear. They're telling me distraction is the best option, Hall said, but they'll need time. Time we do not have, Melania snapped. By now, half the city is whispering. Her breath caught for a moment. If Kamala Harris gets her hands on this, she didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Kamala had a reputation for being precise, relentless, and unafraid to challenge power, especially when she sensed hypocrisy. Charlotte stepped in again. Ma'am, there's already chatter online, not major accounts yet, but it's spreading. Melania stopped pacing. Shut it down. How? Charlotte asked softly. Call platforms, editors, legal teams, use pressure, use favors. I don't care how you do it. Silence it, even for Washington. The order was gargantuan, but the room understood. Melania Trump was fighting for more than reputation. She was fighting for control. Later that evening, Hall reconvened the crisis team. Each option seemed more desperate than the last. Fake leaks to confuse the narrative, quiet payments to journalists, shadow pressure on social platforms. The real danger, one advisor said, leaning forward, isn't the report, it's the reaction. If people believe the First Lady wants this buried at all costs, they'll assume the worst, Hull nodded grimly. And Kamala Harris will capitalize on that faster than anyone. Meanwhile, more than 1,000 miles away in Dallas, Kamala Harris sat in her office reviewing forwarded emails, threads of chatter, and staff memos about the leak. She listened carefully as her team laid out the early timeline, who had seen the report, who had shared it, who was afraid to publish. This wasn't gossip. This was structural, and Kamala sensed an opening. All right, she said, her tone sharp but controlled. Give me the truth. Not guesses, not speculation, the real trail. Marcus Bellamy, her lead researcher, clicked the projector. The document first appeared in a secure medical thread, he said. It spread from there to a few reporters, but no one's published. They're afraid of retaliation. Kamala lifted an eyebrow. Fear does not stop truth. Fear only exposes who benefits from silence. Her team exchanged uneasy glances. When Kamala entered this mode, she didn't just speak. She carved through pretense. Another staffer, Lena Ortiz, spoke up. We're hearing Melania is volatile, angry. Some staffers say it's the worst meltdown she's ever had. Kamala didn't smile, didn't gloat, didn't flinch. Volatile isn't a headline, she said. It's a symptom. If she's reacting this strongly, the leak threatens something they cannot spin. She paused, looking around the table. Her presence was steady, grounded. And that means they'll do anything to bury it? She dialed a journalist she trusted, her voice firm. I know you've seen the document, she said after he answered. Tell me what you know, off the record. I have it, he admitted. But the First Lady's people are circling. Publishing it right now is dangerous. Dangerous for who? Kamala pressed softly. For democracy? For truth? Or for someone's comfort? Silence hung for a beat. You're playing with fire, the journalist whispered. Kamala's eyes narrowed with unwavering certainty. Then let the flames come toward me. I don't fear them. She ended the call, then turned to her team. Here's the rule, she said. Barron Trump is off limits. This is not about him. This is about the structures of power around him. The secrecy, the cover-ups, the pressure, and the hypocrisy. Her staff nodded. And before we continue, she added, glancing at the camera being set up for internal documentation, where are you watching from? I'm curious how far stories like this travel, she continued, seamlessly returning to the strategy. The people deserve transparency, she said. Melania wants to bury truth with silence, so we will use truth to expose silence. That night, Kamala drafted her first remarks, sharp enough to cut through Washington's noise. The next morning, outside her Dallas office, she stood before microphones and delivered her message. Secrecy is the currency of the powerful. When leaks surface, it is not chaos. It is democracy functioning exactly as it should. And when those in the highest positions scramble to bury truth, we should all ask one question: what are they afraid of us knowing? Her words ignited the national conversation. Inside the East Wing, Melania watched the clip in tight-lipped fury. Back in Dallas, Kamala's team watched with quiet satisfaction. Marcus grinned. Congresswoman, you just went viral in every state. Kamala's response was calm. This cannot become gossip. It must remain principle. The moment this is about Barron, we lose the moral ground. She tapped her pen against the table, thinking. But when I speak again, it must land like a hammer. Before she adjourned the meeting, she turned to her staff. with a final, gentle invitation to the public. Before we continue, tell me what part of this hits you the hardest. I read every word. The storm was only beginning, and America was watching. The Rayburn House office building carried a different energy that morning, the kind that precedes a political tremor. Reporters crowded the hallways, cameras humming like restless insects. Staffers whispered urgently to one another, sensing that something far bigger than routine procedure was about to unfold. Kamala Harris stepped into the hearing room without theatrics, without flair, but every eye followed her anyway. She wasn't just attending a transparency subcommittee hearing, she was stepping onto a stage where her words could shake Washington. Across the city, Melania's team gathered around screens in a White House communications room dimly lit by tension. Raymond Hall leaned forward, elbows on his knees, eyes locked on the live feed. "If she goes directly at the White House," he murmured, "we're in trouble." Melania sat beside him, stiff, controlled, but radiating a pressure that made even seasoned staffers swallow hard. She had been briefed repeatedly that Kamala would not mention Barron by name, the red line no one wanted crossed, but Kamala didn't need names to draw blood. The hearing began with routine agenda items, the kind no one cared about today. When Kamala adjusted her microphone, the room fell into anticipatory silence. "America doesn't just run on laws," she began, her tone steady. "It runs on trust. And when leaders begin treating truth as optional, that trust erodes." Members of the committee exchanged uneasy glances. She continued, "We have seen power demand silence. We have seen truth hidden, delayed, distorted to protect image instead of democracy. And when private reports mysteriously disappear or are buried under pressure, the American people deserve to ask why." One congressman tried to interrupt. "Congresswoman Harris, today's hearing pertains specifically to—" Kamala held eye contact with him, unwavering. "Exactly. Transparency, whether it's government contracts, classified documents, or private reports suppressed to shield political families, the pattern is the same." The room erupted in murmurs. Reporters leaned forward, pens poised. Every person in the room knew who she was referring to, without her speaking a single name. Cameras zoomed in as she unfolded a sheet of paper, not the DNA report, but something just as damaging, a timeline of communications showing how aggressively Melania's office had tried to silence the leak. "Within 48 hours, Kamala said, tapping the document, calls were made to editors, to platforms, to legal teams. Pressure was exerted to suppress discussion." She lifted her eyes. "If the report were meaningless, why scramble so hard to bury it?" Gasps, whispers. Melania's nails dug into the arm of her chair as she watched. Hall placed a careful hand on the desk, trying not to show panic. Kamala wasn't done. One reporter shouted from the back, breaking decorum, "Are you accusing the First Lady of covering something up?" Kamala's response was surgical. "I'm saying this, truth doesn't need bodyguards, and if releasing the truth threatens someone's comfort, that says more about the comfort than the truth." In the White House viewing room, Melania's fist clenched. "She is exploiting this," Melania hissed. Hall leaned in. "She's framing it as principle, not attack. If we hit back, we look guilty." Melania shook her head firmly. "No, if we stay silent, we look weak." Back in the hearing chamber, Kamala eased into her closing statement. "Families should be off limits," she said, voice softening. "But when secrecy becomes a shield for power, when anger replaces accountability, we all lose. This is not about one household, it is about every household that deserves honesty from those who lead them." Reporters burst into questioning, cameras flashed, committee members whispered fiercely among themselves. Kamala gathered her papers calmly and walked out, but the storm lingered behind her like thunder. Outside, microphones swarmed her instantly. Her staff shielded her as she delivered carefully rehearsed non-answers, the kind that fuel speculation without igniting backlash. Inside the East Wing, Melania watched as cable news replayed the clip over and over. Every network had found their headline, "The truth doesn't need bodyguards." Kamala Harris confronts the White House. Social media exploded, pollsters scrambled, pundits argued, and Melania felt the walls closing in. By nightfall, the battle lines were unmistakable. Kamala wasn't attacking the First Lady as a mother. She was targeting the structure around her, the secrecy, the silence, the panic. It was precise, calculated, devastating. At a diner in Indianapolis, a woman watching the clip shook her head. "If it's nothing," she murmured, "why's Melania losing her mind?" Across the counter, a man replied, "Because something ain't adding up. They hide something every time." That kind of conversation echoed across the country. In living rooms, barbershops, school lounges, factory break rooms, perception was shifting, and perception in politics was often more dangerous than truth. Inside the White House, The mood was grim. Staffers whispered as they moved through corridors. Hall finally spoke what everyone feared to say. First Lady Kamala just took control of the narrative. Melania said nothing. Her silence was louder than rage. As the crisis team waited for orders, she stood slowly, every movement deliberate. Prepare a response, she said. Nobody breathed. Then she added colder. She thinks I am weak. She will learn otherwise. Before the team began drafting, Melania paused, staring at the TV still playing Kamala's clip. Before we continue, she whispered, almost to herself, comment your thoughts below. I want to know what they say. Her staff exchanged a glance, unsure whether she meant it figuratively or literally. Either way, the message was clear. Melania was preparing to strike back, and Washington was far from ready. By the third day, Melania's silence had become louder than any statement she could have made. Cable networks ran tickers at the bottom of the screen. Where is the First Lady? Why no response from Melania Trump? Commentators dissected her stillness like it was a strategy, when in truth it was. Something far more dangerous, a hesitation born from wounded pride. Inside the East Wing, curtains were drawn tight, shutting out daylight as if transparency itself were the enemy. Melania's senior staff gathered around a long table. Hall stood at the head, papers spread out. Charlotte sat opposite him, a stack of press clippings in her hands. Melania entered last, wearing a pale-fitted suit, her features sculpted into an unreadable mask. Tell me what we do, she said. Hall inhaled deeply. We strike back, but carefully. You must appear as a mother first, First Lady second. We paint Kamala Harris as reckless, someone dragging families into political theater for her own gain. If we make this about decency, we win. Charlotte slid a draft statement toward Melania. Short, controlled, you don't mention Kamala by name, but you imply the boundaries she crossed. Melania scanned the statement, then set it down with a flick of her wrist. Not enough, Hall stiffened. With respect, going harder could backfire. Right now, Harris holds public sympathy. If we target her directly, we look guilty, Melania finished for him. I am not hiding. I am protecting. There is a difference. Her voice carried a coldness that stopped the room. Then, more quietly, she makes me look desperate. I will show her I am strong. Later that afternoon, a small camera crew entered the private residence. No press, no East Room staging, no lighting technicians, just a single camera, a chair, and Melania Trump. Sunlight brushed the edge of her face, intentional but subtle, enough to humanize, not enough to soften. She spoke directly into the lens. I have always believed children must be off limits, she began, accent crisp and steady. What I see now is shameful. People in positions of power using rumors and lies to attack my family. My son deserves privacy, not spectacle, and I will never stop protecting him. The recording lasted less than 2 minutes, but when it aired, it detonated across the country like a flash grenade. Supporters praised her strength. Critics said she dodged the actual questions. Analysts replayed her tone, her pauses, her phrasing. The country divided instantly. In Dallas, Kamala Harris's staff watched the clip in their conference room. Marcus broke the stunned silence. She's doubling down on the mother angle. Smart. It shields her from attack. Kamala crossed her arms, eyes narrowing. It shields her from questions, she corrected. And questions don't disappear just because she whispers privacy into a camera. Lena looked uneasy. But this will stir sympathy. People get protective when it comes to children. Kamala nodded. That's why we never touched Barron, and we never will. Her tone sharpened. This isn't about her son. This is about her silence, and the lengths she goes to maintain it. She turned to her staff. And before we continue, type truth in the comments if you can feel how deep this story runs beneath the surface. Around the country, conversations echoed like scattered thunder. At a barbershop in Detroit, a customer muttered, she didn't deny anything, she just said, don't talk about it. At a hospital break room in Seattle, a nurse sighed. If she's innocent, why act like this? In a Texas workshop, a foreman folded his arms. They always say family when they don't want to say truth. The sentiment spread. Melania wasn't answering. She was deflecting, and perception was hardening. Back inside the East Wing, Hall and Charlotte monitored the fallout. None of the reactions surprised them, but the intensity did. Every attempt to guide the narrative seemed to create more ripples. Hall finally spoke what he'd held back. First Lady, we cannot keep denying without specifics. People are already asking if this report is fake. If it is fake, why not release proof? If it is real, Melania cut him off sharply. I will not legitimize lies by responding to them. But that's the problem, Hall said gently. People don't believe they are lies anymore. Melania's eyes hardened. They will. Then she walked out, leaving her team in a silence so dense it felt like fog. Meanwhile, in Dallas, Kamala's phone buzzed relentlessly. CNN, MSNBC, ABC, all requesting interviews. Her moment had come. Marcus entered with a tablet, excitement barely contained. Congresswoman, you're trending again. 7-point approval jump among independents. People are calling you the voice of transparency. Kamala didn't react with celebration. She leaned back, thoughtful. But this cannot become a spectacle. The moment we make it about emotion instead of principle, we lose the moral high ground. Lena nodded slowly. So, what's our next step? Kamala tapped her pen lightly against the desk. Not yet. Let them chase me. Let them demand a comment. Momentum is power, and right now they're running toward us. She paused. But when I speak again, it will land like a hammer. That evening, the White House war room pulsed with urgency. Press staffers scrambled, phones rang, new drafts were written, discarded, rewritten. Kamala framed this as a battle for truth, Charlotte warned. We're reacting, not leading. Hall pinched the bridge of his nose. We need a third path, something that isn't silence and isn't attack. Melania entered the room quietly. Her presence silenced everyone. Then create one, she said. Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. Across the country, television screens continued playing Kamala's testimony beside Melania's recorded message. Social feeds spun faster, commentary swelled. The storm was no longer building. It had arrived, and neither woman planned to back down. Melania's pushback didn't stop with a 2-minute video. By the next morning, the East Wing had shifted from defensive mode into controlled aggression. Friendly media outlets received talking points. Longtime allies in conservative circles were quietly encouraged to frame Kamala Harris as opportunistic, a politician weaponizing a family's private pain. Columns began appearing with headlines like, "Has Kamala gone too far? Melania shows grace as Harris fans the flames." But for every supportive voice, 3 more questioned the timing, the message, the emotional undertone of Melania's video. In the West Wing briefing room, reporters asked, why didn't the First Lady deny the allegations? Is the White House hiding something? Why is Kamala Harris the only one demanding transparency? The press secretary danced around every question with rehearsed answers, so thin they only fed suspicion. Meanwhile, social media had gone into full wildfire mode. On Twitter, hashtags like "Charging Truth Doesn't Hide" and "Let Her Answer" trended for 48 hours straight. TikTok creators spliced Kamala's hearing remarks with Melania's statement, creating a narrative contrast the White House could no longer control. Instagram Reels mocked the rumor that Melania threw a vase in the residence, a rumor staffers wouldn't confirm but also wouldn't deny. Inside the East Wing, Hall and Charlotte reviewed polling data. People think you're emotional, Charlotte said quietly. Not dishonest, but emotional, defensive. Melania's jaw tightened. Good. Emotions prove humanity. Hall shook his head. Not in politics. In politics, emotion looks like instability. Kamala is coming across as steady, factual, controlled. Melania stepped closer, her voice sharp enough to cut. She is not controlled. She is calculating, Charlotte swallowed. But that's what the public reads as control. Melania's eyes flickered with something colder than anger, the bitterness of being misunderstood in her own house. Then we changed the story, she said. Hall hesitated. How? Without fueling suspicion? Melania didn't blink. We go public. Again, but bigger. That afternoon, the White House announced an unexpected live sit-down interview with Melania, her first in many months. The news cycle shifted instantly. Producers scrambled. Networks rearranged their schedules. Pundits speculated whether she would deny the DNA leak outright or attack Kamala directly. Kamala's staff watched from their Dallas office. Lena frowned at the TV. She's preparing to hit harder. Marcus nodded. It's risky. If she overplays it, it backfires. Kamala remained still, her gaze fixed on Melania's face as it appeared on screen in pre-interview previews. She's not doing this because she's confident, Kamala said softly. She's doing it because she feels cornered. Her staff exchanged glances. Marcus asked, "Do you want to issue a statement before the interview?" Kamala shook her head. "No, let her speak first. The truth always reveals itself when people scramble." She paused, then glanced at her communications aide filming internal notes. "And before we continue, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I love seeing how far stories like this travel." Her tone remained natural, but the call-out carried undertones of strategy. Kamala always used connection as leverage. When Melania sat down for the interview, the country held its breath. She wore a muted cream suit, Neckline simple, hair neatly pinned, an image designed to evoke grace under pressure. The interviewer began with soft questions, easing into the tension, but eventually, "First Lady, there's a perception that you're avoiding the core issue. Is there a reason you haven't directly denied the report?" Melania's expression didn't change. "I refuse to dignify lies. I focus on protecting my family. Lies deserve silence, not attention." But Kamala Harris argues that transparency— Melania lifted her hand slightly as a controlled interruption. "Kamala Harris built her career on drama. I build mine on dignity." The interviewer blinked. "I think people want clarity," she pressed. Melania leaned in, voice low but firm. "Clarity is not given to those who chase gossip." Back in Dallas, Kamala exhaled a slow, measured breath. "She made a mistake," Kamala murmured. Lena frowned. "Where?" "The moment she personalized it," Kamala said. "She made it Melania versus Kamala, not truth versus secrecy. That means she stepped into my arena." Kamala stood, pacing thoughtfully. "And when people compare us side by side, they will see who is asking questions and who is avoiding them." Marcus checked his tablet. "Congresswoman, this clip is trending already?" Kamala smiled faintly. "It will." Across the country, reactions poured in. At a small cafe in Ohio, a man said, "She never denied it. She just attacked Kamala." At a college dorm in Georgia, a student murmured, "If you refuse to answer a question, that's an answer." In a hardware store in Montana, someone whispered, "I think Melania's hiding something." And once again, perception shifted. The interview had not stabilized Melania, it had exposed her. Back in the White House, Melania's team gathered after the interview. Hall looked strained. "This didn't land the way we hoped," he admitted. "People wanted clarity. We didn't give it." Melania stood at the window, arms crossed. "They wanted a spectacle," she said. "I don't perform for them." Charlotte stepped forward carefully. "First Lady, they don't want a performance. They want reassurance." Melania turned, her voice trembling with suppressed fury. "I owe them nothing, nothing." The room froze. Melania rarely raised her voice. When she did, it shook the foundation around her. Hall cleared his throat gently. "We need to prepare for Kamala's next move." Melania stared at him, then nodded once. "Yes, we prepare." But inside something was unraveling. The pressure, the scrutiny, the feeling of being hunted in her own home. She whispered to herself as she left the room, "She will not win. I will not allow it." Yet the truth was undeniable. The nation was leaning toward Kamala, and no strategy had managed to stop it. By the fourth day, Kamala Harris's message had cemented itself into the national bloodstream. Commentators repeated her lines on loop, especially, "Truth doesn't need bodyguards." The phrase appeared on protest signs outside media buildings, in TikTok edits viewed millions of times, in Instagram captions dissecting political accountability. The more it spread, the smaller Melania's attempts at control seemed. Inside the East Wing, Melania reviewed the latest headlines sprawled across Charlotte's tablet. "Harris owns the transparency fight." Melania dodges again. "If there is nothing to hide, why hide it?" Melania felt the air tighten around her. "This is not truth," she whispered. "This is manipulation." Hall approached cautiously. "First Lady, we have to recalibrate. Harris is framing you as the obstruction, not the victim." Melania stood tall. "I am a mother. I am defending my son. Why can they not see that?" Hall hesitated. "Because you never directly answer the question." Silence, heavy, uncomfortable, dangerous. Melania looked at Hall the way someone looks at a trusted advisor who has just crossed a line. "I will not answer lies," she said, voice trembling. "I am not on trial." Hall nodded weakly. "I understand, but the public doesn't." The tension hung there until Melania broke it with a sharp inhale. "We go harder." Charlotte's eyes widened. "How much harder?" "Hard enough that Kamala regrets ever speaking my name." Meanwhile, Kamala Harris was preparing her own message. Inside her Dallas office, her staff gathered around a large screen showing clips of Melania's interview. Kamala listened quietly, hands steepled beneath her chin. Lena spoke first. "She didn't deny anything, she just attacked you," Marcus added. "Public sentiment is shifting more. People want transparency now. They're asking why the White House won't answer straightforward questions." Kamala nodded slowly. "This isn't about the report anymore," she said. "It's about trust, and Melania is losing that battle." She stood, walking toward the window overlooking downtown Dallas. "Before we continue," she said softly to the camera, recording her next statement, "tell me your thoughts below. I read every single one." Her tone wasn't performative, and it was grounding, almost intimate. The kind of line that pulls viewers deeper into the narrative. Then she turned back to her team. "It's time," Kamala said. "Draft the statement." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "The big one?" "Yes," Kamala replied. "The one that closes this chapter." That evening, Kamala stepped before a podium at a scheduled press briefing. The room went silent immediately. Cameras clicked, lights brightened. She began without preamble. When truth threatens power, power rushes to bury it. But when leaders forget that they serve the people, not their own image, accountability becomes a necessity, not a choice. Reporters leaned forward. Kamala continued. "I have never mentioned the First Lady's son, nor will I. Children are off limits, always. But when a leader's reaction causes more questions than answers, when silence becomes a shield, when anger replaces clarity, the nation deserves transparency." Her voice sharpened, echoing off the walls. "This is not about rumors. This is about integrity, about whether our leaders operate in the light or in the shadows." The room held its breath. Kamala ended with a final piercing line. "And if the truth makes someone uncomfortable, that discomfort belongs to them, not the American people." The moment she stepped away from the podium, the clip exploded across every platform. Inside the White House, Melania watched it in a solitude so palpable the air felt still. She whispered, barely audible, "She thinks she is righteous. She thinks she is untouchable." Then louder, "She does not know me." She turned from the screen and walked through the residence, the same halls where secretaries whispered, where staffers tiptoed, where rumors grew like moss in dark corners. Aides heard something break that night, maybe a vase, maybe something more fragile. No one asked, no one dared. All they knew was this: Melania Trump had reached her breaking point. By dawn, the national conversation had fully shifted. It was no longer, "Is the report real?" It was, "Why is Melania fighting this so violently?" Trust spiraled downward. Doubt surged upward. Kamala's approval soared. Melania's tightened. Hall and Charlotte reviewed the latest data. "It's bad," Charlotte whispered. "Really bad." Hall looked at her solemnly. "We've lost control of the story." Melania entered the room quietly, overhearing the words. "No," she said. "We have not lost." But even she didn't believe it. Her posture was stiff. Her eyes were tired. Her voice lacked its earlier certainty. Charlotte opened her mouth to speak, but Melania raised a hand. "Enough strategies," she said. "Enough statements, enough lies." Hall asked softly, "What do you want to do now?" Melania looked out the window, the city hazy, the sky gray. "I want peace," she whispered. Then, with a trembling breath, "But Washington does not allow peace." Her final words carried the weight of a woman who had fought too many battles behind too many closed doors. "And Kamala Harris has turned my silence into a weapon." She closed her eyes, and for the first time since the leak began, Melania Trump allowed herself to feel the exhaustion she had been outrunning. The house was quiet, the city was loud, and the nation had chosen its narrative. Whether Melania agreed or not no longer mattered. The story had grown larger than her. Thank you so much for staying with this story until the end. Moments like these remind us how complex, human, and fragile people can be behind the walls of power. If this narrative moved you or made you think differently about truth, family, or the cost of secrecy, then before you go, tell me what part hit you the hardest. Your voice genuinely matters here. If you felt the emotion in Melania's struggle, if you saw the weight behind Kamala's words, or if you simply believe stories like this deserve to be told, please like, share, and drop your thoughts in the comments. Your voice shapes the next chapter more than you know. Thank you for watching and for feeling this with me.